Atlantic Security Alliance, the NATO, should have nothing to do with China. But China sees the U.S. to extend its global security partnership network to our region. So this kind of U.S. beating China, speaking on negative terms, acting with the negative action, bringing the regional country, Vietnam, Singapore together, would only serve to make China's view on the U.S. Even more negative.
Professor Shen, from China's perspective, Prime Minister Li has made a very sharp point, said Washington's tough views of China are increasingly matched by the Chinese belief that the U.S. can't be trusted and wants to block its emergence. What's your opinion on China's perception towards Biden's America?
Yeah, I understand and I accept the Prime Minister's view. Actually, this is kind of the so-called self-fulfilling prophecy. The more the U.S. would view China as an enemy, the more U.S. would push China to view the U.S. as unfriendly, to say at least. So this kind of a relationship, down spiraling, is against what the Prime Minister has wished.
You cut the worst fucking interface in the world.
To engage, to interact, to understand correctly, and to improve their ability to understand each other. For my personal view, I don't think China considers that China deserves a more prominent position in the world. And U.S. needs to understand China to improve its global position without changing the global order. The order is the U.S. is currently a global economic leader, a leader in scientific and engineering. But China is catching up. Rather than beating China, curbing Huawei, not to allow it to participate in the global chain of the economic engagement. U.S. should respect Huawei, accept Huawei, and improve Huawei whenever Huawei goes wrong. But rather than to take out Huawei, to expel Huawei from the global market.
We're seeing the United States is creating its own enemy.
Already, U.S. has put many Chinese next to me, surrounding me. They view, especially those younger generation Chinese, they view the U.S. as very hostile to China's legitimate interests. In my personal view, I think U.S. should understand China to improve its own position without changing the current global order. So U.S. has not understood China's interests well, but at the same time, China should communicate what I have understand precisely to U.S. Don't send some wrong message. We are coming, we are awesome, and nobody should stand in front of us. China should not talk about this, and to get away from such a kind of rhetoric, which cannot precisely represent China's right position.
At Fudan University. After the break, we'll take a look at why China is growing fast in a digital economy.
It's become one of the great mandatory outdoors they are in other parts of the city.
Now is not the time for compromise, for balanced lockdowns, for thinking about the economy, freedoms versus the health advice. Now is the time to act strongly to eliminate the virus from the Sydney community. This is probably our last chance.
Yet some parts of the city, including Bondi, face fewer restrictions than suburbs in Sydney's west, which health officials say account for most of the cases. Most people in those COVID hotspots can't leave their homes except for essential reasons, and many are not able to work.
Already we're hearing large cases of heartbreaking stories. Steve, they've ruined our lives. We can no longer afford to pay our mortgage, our rent. We can't work out. We're now skipping meals because our residents are one of the poorest residents in New South Wales.
State authorities say Australian Defence Force personnel will assist in operations across Sydney for 6 weeks, but could remain longer if needed with efforts to bring Sydney's outbreak under control.
That was Greg Navarro reporting. Coming up, Team China has a slow day at the Olympics, but remains gold leader.
Lhasa, Ningxi, Shagatz, railway tripping.
What's the army going to do to keep Australians in their houses?
About the cloud, this idea of holding information and even programs in the cloud, not physically on any device, but streaming over the air to you. So it's a very, very important technical innovation. The same way that automation freed up people from repetitive tasks, I mean, physical ones, this technology, the digital economy, is starting to free up people in terms of repetitive tasks that were intellectual, like lawyers,
cascading style sheets,
accountants, a lot of things that have to do with design, research into medicine. I could go on with a whole long list.
And digitalization of the industry and logistics are quite important. So could you give us some example of how they help to improve the efficiency?
Well, when you have a tremendous amount of information, you can anticipate what's going to happen. For instance, if you're in shipping and you have ships out there and you know storms are coming, instead of trying to figure it out by one person or a couple of teams looking at screens and trying to anticipate it, you can assign this to a basically an automated process that will flag you and say, listen, there's storms in this area, and there's a problem with fuel in this area. We've calculated and we're rerouting things. For instance, when the Suez Canal was blocked, there had to be a tremendous amount of effort to reroute all of this traffic that was backed up, because many companies, they depend on just-in-time inventory, and that means they cannot afford any delays. Otherwise, they literally shut down. So a good example of how the digital economy is driving innovation and also productivity.
And it also changed our lives. But what are the key factors that allow China's digital economy to grow at such a high rate?
Well, China didn't have the kind of older legacy systems, especially in the primary world countries. Now, if you take a look at the top 5 countries, China is number 2, but the other 4 countries, the US and basically Europe, they're in there. But China had an advantage. It has a huge population, massive market, and you have things like Alibaba and also Weixin, Tencent.
In training, but to get here and to get this is all worth it.
Worthington's gold medal success was built on a 360 backflip. She fell attempting to do the trick on her first attempt, but landed it second time round. It's the first time a woman has successfully completed the maneuver in a competition.
I think going into this, I set my sights on gold.
Mention technology. How do you see the potential of 5G and AI in the Chinese market?
Well, 5G and AI. Okay, so break it down. It's not just those two. It's actually 3 things. Massive amounts of data that's being collected. And then AI is able to take that data and mine it to see, who would be most likely to buy something. Crops, where are there going to be shortages and surpluses? How to regulate what is being planted, how to get better information, how to use less weed killer and chemicals and get greater yields and save water at the same time. So, as I said, it drives efficiency. And then you have 5G. 5G is the communication network. It allows real-time processing of this information so that people, whether you're doing agriculture or finance, you're getting a real-time picture of what is happening, and that makes you more efficient.
What do you think is the Internet's role through and after the COVID-19 pandemic era, especially in the fight against the virus and during the global economic recovery?
Well, it's just the Internet has been a tool both for good and bad, because we've seen in some countries, especially in the U.S. And other places, there has been a tremendous amount of disinformation spread over social media. There's a lot of suspicions, very wild conspiracy theories and things like that. So it allows that to open up. But at the same time, it's an information source. If people are serious about it, they can go and find out what to do, how to do it. And this is very, very important in terms of doing it. Now, the other aspects of the digital economy as it affects that is it helps in medicine. They would not have been able to put these vaccines together unless they had AI helping them to narrow down exactly what they were looking for.
Mm-hmm. And China's digital economy is currently ranked the second in the world. So what areas do you think need to be improved for China to optimize the growth of its digital economy?
Well, as I was alluding to earlier, I mean, the opportunities are huge in almost every area, whether you're in manufacturing, design, agriculture, finance, social media, smart grids, how you regulate your electricity and use it more efficiency, medicine. So, but there are issues. There is a huge digital divide that is shaping up. China's at the forefront of it, but the rest of the world is really, really trailing behind the top five. Then you have this issue about security. How secure are your transactions? Privacy, social disconnect because of the way that the social media is handled, and the complexity.
Of 20 historic figures who shaped the course of ancient China. Meet the most renowned ancient Chinese rulers, ministers, thinkers, scientists, poets, and rebels, and find out how they continue to influence the Chinese to this day. Subscribe to Makers and Shakers of Chinese History for free on your favorite podcast app.
24 minutes past the hour. A poll shows that U.S. public views on President Joe Biden's handling of COVID-19 in the U.S. economy have declined. The CNBC.
No.
Sure. And is this a union position or non-union?
Oh, fuck. There's just
It is a union position.
Okay. So in terms of whether it's allowed and if it's allowed for how long, the only one that can answer that is the union, and because the answer is somewhere in the collective agreement. So not only is the union the only one that can answer it, to the extent that what they're doing is wrong, your employer, the only one that can do something about that is the union. So without having the collective agreement or without seeing other agreements that the union and the casino may have had, I can't answer that. It has to be the union.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Steve. Really appreciate it. Ken, you're up. Thanks for hanging on. Good evening.
Hi there. I'm calling in regards to my father. He went on long-term disability in 2008. And and they continued to pay his benefits up until they called him about a week ago and said that they just realized that they're still paying out his benefits and that they had to review it and that he might be cut off. Now, he turned 65 in 13 months. And they cut him off now?
So is it fair to say that he's not going to be able to go back and he's not going back there?
No. He's been off for 12, 13 years now, so.
Right. And how long, when did he start working there, approximately? How many years?
He started in about 94, 95, so I guess he would have been 13, 14 years before he went off.
Okay, got it. And last question, big company or small company?
A medium-sized company.
Okay, got it. So here's the thing. Yeah. Can they cut him off? Yes, they can, but that becomes a termination of his employment. It's what we call a frustration of contract. His employment is terminated. He's, by the way, believe it or not, even though he's been gone for 13 years, because they've kept his benefits going, he's still an employee. So now, by doing that, the employment comes to an end, and they have to pay him the equivalent if he's been there for, let's say, that's 27 years. So it'll be, in his case, 34 weeks pay they'd have to pay.
Wait, you got to pay him off severance for the time he's on disability too, eh?
Fight for survival, to help them regain who they are, to speak, let it out, because we are stronger together, and we have to keep sharing our stories till it hits the desk and create change. And I just continue, we stay strong, and please keep doing what you're doing, and I just hope the families take the time they need to keep going.
Amen. Thank you. And Dion, again, my heart goes out to you and to your family and to those in Ohio who are experiencing the pain of loss. We keep saying that the people that were victims were lost. They were taken. Murder is about taking. This individual got on the road. He could have turned around at any point, but his hatred drove him to the city by the Rio Grande. So my prayer, Dion, is that you will continue to keep your head up, know that change requires commitment, and because you are committed, we can only affect change. The last part of the Serenity Prayer says, and the things I cannot change.
Thanks, guys. Lots of questions. So here's one for you. Non-unionized position, my company, stat holiday pay. So Christmas Day, New Year's Day, Easter, right? What are the laws in regards to that? Is it automatic 8 hours for the holiday, or can they pay you your stat holiday pay based on the hours you worked the week before?
So what you do is you add up your wages and vacation pay for the 4 weeks before the week with the holiday in it, and you divide that by 20. So it's a mathematical calculation. So if the holiday is this week, we forget about this week. We look at the 4 weeks before, and whatever the total is, if you earned, I don't know, $10,000, I don't know, whatever it is in that 4 weeks period, divide that by 20. That's how much they have to pay you for statutory holiday.
Oh, really?
That's exactly how it works, yes.
With you. Stay with us here on the Beijing Hour.
Join the most popular Chinese language learning page on Facebook by searching for CRI Learn Chinese. It's a quick yet
is critical for survival for people at risk during heat waves. And yet, insurers don't cover it because they see it as not medically necessary.
A call to make cool air a public health priority and debate over who should provide it. Tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News.
So, I got nothing for you.
Hello everyone, this is Zoon Ahmed Khan, journalist from Pakistan. Intelligence Unit. Today is a very fun program. It is a place you hear interesting people discuss global events, social trends, and what is happening in China and in the rest of the world. So friends around the world, hope you can join us.
In-depth analysis, valuable insights, expert views, presented by an award-winning team. Today, keeping you well-informed, up-to-date, and ahead of the news.
You are listening to Word Today with me, Anna, in Beijing. Faced with ongoing surge of migration and a worsening pandemic situation, the Biden administration will indefinitely extend a controversial Trump-era policy. It relies on public health authority to quickly expel single adults and some families detained at the southern border. Known as Title 42, the policy allows the CDC to prohibit the entry of migrants through Mexico or Canada due to, quote, a serious danger of introduction of COVID-19 into the United States.
How is that a Trump-era policy?
The move is purely political.
How is that?
Immigration policy has become a persistent political liability for President Joe Biden. So for this and more, let's have Harvey Zodi joining us on the line. He's the former vice president of the ABC TV network and a senior fellow at the Center for China and Globalization.
This is all bullshit.
Thanks for joining us, Harvey.
After an aircraft arriving in Nanjing from Russia caused a cluster of infections that have since spread to other places in China. Han Guangzhou from the Civil Aviation Administration says they're working on a new version of guidelines.
Remember when they tried telling you, oh, only from certain seats to certain seats it could spread?
Increased testing for frontline staff. Those who have direct contact with passengers, cargo, and aircraft will be tested every other day. will also help airports strengthen prevention and control measures
Why
to
not
avoid
every
close
day?
contact between
Why not every
international and
day?
domestic passengers and their staff.
The official says the administration will also take more strict measures against the risk of imported COVID-19 cases. Health officials say over 1.7 billion doses of vaccine have been administered across the Chinese mainland. An infectious disease expert says Chinese COVID-19 vaccines are effective in protecting people from the Delta variant. Zhang Wenhong says the vaccines can largely decrease the risk of severe cases and deaths, though they're not 100% effective in preventing infection.
Compared with the previous strains of the coronavirus, there are more breakthrough cases with the Delta variant. But we've seen a sharp decline of severe cases and deaths caused by the Delta variant. That means the current vaccines are doubtlessly effective in preventing people against the Delta variant.
He also said lowered social mobility will greatly curb the spread of the virus. At the Tokyo Olympics, China's pace in the medal hunt slowed down on Wednesday, but the country still tops the table with 32 golds. It has 22 silvers and 16 bronze medals. The only medal for Team China yesterday came from women's duet artistic.
The racist origins of Title 42. It does make some good policy sense in this unique moment of history. The Delta variant is posing a global challenge, not only to the U.S., but to China and every country. It's very potent, very transmissible, and cases are spiking up in the U.S. and everywhere. So, as is often the case in public policy, there are no good or even ideal choices, only the choice of the lesser evil. So, if Title 42 prohibitions were lifted, I honestly do believe that the U.S. public health situation would be much, much worse. More COVID hospitalizations, more cases, and a rise in deaths. Immigration policy has to be balanced against the many benefits of immigration until COVID is conquered.
Good.
And
you going home?
Nobody knows when that hoped-for moment will come. Next year, the year after, we honestly don't know.
We know hundreds of migrant children detained at the border. They have been tested positive for COVID-19, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And reports also say the number of infections in the detention facilities surging, in a large part because of the horrible conditions these children are living, with few or no COVID protections. The children, we know they are exempt from the Title 42, but is the policy likely to make any improvements, make the conditions any better for these kids?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, their conditions are better in the sense that before in the Trump administration, for a variety of reasons, many of them political and playing to the Trump base, the children were literally caged like animals. They were in cages. Disgusting. But like I said, the policy options available to decision makers often involve the lesser of two evils, and they involve a balancing of interests. I suspect with the U.S. health system in Texas, for example, one of the hardest hit states due to the Trump-like governor's policies there, that having to have suffered so much in their own countries from gang warfare, poverty, disease, will again be victimized by their prevention from entering the U.S. or being expelled. It's a tragic situation, to be sure, but there's no good solution. Our hearts go out especially to the children. Many of them are unaccompanied. We absolutely need to get more vaccines into their arms through COVAX and other means. But it's not a pretty picture.
What does COVAX have to do with people detained in your country?
Haven't stopped because according to reports from human rights NGOs in the United States, some of them are kidnapped, raped, and assaulted. under the title of 42 since Biden took office in January. Why do you think this policy make people particularly vulnerable to these types of attacks?
Well, look, these people are coming from far away. They're not from Mexico. They're from Mexico's neighbors, near neighbors, and far neighbors. They paid coyotes,
not your far neighbors, the Mexico
unsavory people, to get them across borders to get as far as they've gotten into Mexico, and in some cases into the U.S. These people are vulnerable at every stage of their journey. They're really stuck, and they're out there without any defenses, without any protection. And so being even in Mexico on the southern U.S. border, it's not an ideal place to be. Mexico is a troubled country facing numerous challenges.
You see what he just did?
And since most of the would-be immigrants from further afield...
every fucking other word, this guy is putting shade on shit. In Mexico, on the southern U.S. border, it's not on nothing. They're in Mexico. But you're still laying ownership to it. It's ours to control, but it's your problem. You're pathetic, white boy. You're pathetic.
It's a tragedy within a tragedy. But again, there are no good choices here.
Mm-hmm. So in general, what do you make of Biden's performance on this realm?
He's at home and abroad. The comments come after China saw good performance in its foreign trade in the period between January and June. Data from the General Administration of Customs shows that China's foreign trade surged 27% year-on-year to 18 trillion yuan,
not worthy
about
of
2.8 trillion US dollars in the first half. The resumption of production.
This Thursday, tomorrow, marks an important shift in Iranian politics. Iran's pragmatic president, Hassan Rouhani, will leave office after 2 terms in power. He'll be replaced by Ebrahim Raisi. Raisi is a hardline former judge who is under U.S. sanctions for his part in the executions of political prisoners. NPR's Peter Kenyon reports that relations between the U.S. and Iran are likely to get even chillier.
Ebrahim Raisi is taking power at a difficult...
On peut trouver que ça aboutit à des politiques insuffisamment positives pour l'environnement ou pour la pollution, mais le fait est qu'au final, le coup près, il tombe là.
Startup Accelerator Program with operations already launched in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Hong Kong. 4 additional startup hubs are to be developed in Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. And with more on this, we're joined by financial analyst Cao Sam. Good morning. And first up, Huawei says it'll invest $100 million to help countries develop these startup hubs in the Asia-Pacific region. So what do you make of Huawei's shift in focus?
Well, it is really helping the entire Asian region to integrate technologically and for entrepreneurs all around the world to grow. And Huawei doesn't just act as a financial investor, but it could act as a strategic investor by providing expertise, technology, supply chain, and that's also good for the development of Huawei to tap into talents all around Asia.
Well, so
I'm going to tune out. I really am.
Of China-India border areas. So to talk more about this, we're joined by Dr. Ye Hailing, Director of the Center for South Asia Studies at Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Ye.
Good evening.
So another hotline has been established between China and India. What signal does the move send out?
It means that both sides have the political willingness to control the situation, maintain the status quo, but of course, we should admit that it's still a long way to go to reach the final solution to solve this long-term border dispute. But anyway, we we think we can give a praise for the current achievement made by the dialogue between the military commando level. This means
tap into the unmet needs in the technology sector. This is a very competitive sector, and we have competition around the globe. And for a lot of these upstarts, they need to figure out a niche where they have the competitive advantage.
Israelis are very worried about the situation. They don't think there's a possibility of dealing with Iran at any quasi-diplomatic level, and they tend to believe, as well they might, that if Khamenei and the Iranian media make threatening sounds against Israel, that these are genuine.
Meanwhile, just as Raisi is set to begin his presidential duties, a trial thousands of miles away in Sweden will shine a light on what human rights groups call an atrocity from his past: mass executions of political prisoners in the 1980s. Raisi himself is not a defendant, but the case will rekindle memories of his role in ordering those executions, and will remind the world that Ebrahim Raisi is the first Iranian president to take office while under American sanctions for his human rights record. Peter Kenyon, NPR News, Istanbul.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News. When Tokyo residents talk about the Olympics, their feelings typically include some version of "it's complicated." Coronavirus cases are soaring, there are scattered protests, but at the same time, Team Japan is raking in a record number of gold.
Which has nothing to do with hosting the Olympics. Which has nothing to do with hosting the Olympics.
Very important to avoid the military confrontation in the future. So I think the boost the dialogue means they are focusing on how to make all practical.
Times last year's hiring figure. Staffing systems operations, sales, and offline services are among the top demands. Providing professional courses in various areas